DesJarlais yields back. I thank her, and we now recognize the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. DesJarlais, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to our panel. We have an awful lot of issues that we face here in Congress, whether it's a health care law, whether it's the threat of ISIS, or the deficit, any number of issues. But I can tell you that this Waters of the U.S. rule has really grabbed the attention of a lot of people, and I know it's not Tennessee-centric because I have contacts from around the country, whether it's California, South Dakota, Colorado, calling me saying you've got to stop this rule. So I'm very grateful that we're having this hearing today. I want to kind of look at it from an oversight perspective a little bit today in terms of how so many agencies are taking steps to circumvent the rule review process. And specifically, I'd like to look at it economically in terms of how the OIRA and EPA have tried to circumvent this rule. On March the 3rd, Mr. Howard Shalansky, the administrator of the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, or IRA, easy for me to say, right, testified before the House Oversight and Government Reform Subcommittee on Administrative Rules. And this, of course, is the office responsible for reviewing the legality and economic impact of a new federal rule before they are published and ultimately accepting or rejecting the proposed rule. It was troubling to me that when we asked Mr. Shalansky whether or not he could present to our committee the documents that they used to make a ruling that this was non-major or economically non-significant. We know the cutoff for that is $100 million per year. So what I'm going to ask of you all later, and possibly the second panel, is that we talk about that $100 million per year cost. Somehow, after reviewing the Waters of the U.S. rule, OIRA determined that it was not a significant rule and therefore not subject to congressional review, despite estimates of annual costs ranging from $160 to $278 million per year, and some of these estimates coming from Army Corps engineers and EPA. And what was also concerning was that the lack of documentation that Mr. Shalansky was unable to provide, because it wasn't just the Tennessee Farm Bureau, which is the largest in the nation, who was here asking questions, or farmers from all around our district. The NFIB, or National Federation of Independent Businesses, sent a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Acts request, to the EPA, and also Small Business Office of Advocacy sent letters asking for documentation on how they came about this rule, and the EPA sent a letter back saying they have no documentation. So I guess what I'd like to accomplish today is that next time we have Mr. Shalansky or the EPA in front of one of our committees, we can give them documentation that this rule is indeed going to cost more than $100 million. So I don't know if anyone on the panel came prepared with numbers, but Mr. Smeltz, do you have any idea from what you've been hearing from your folks back home what the economic impact might be?
Well, I don't know what broad spectrum of jurisdiction this $100 million figure is you're speaking of. You're talking about across the state?
Across the nation. Across the nation.
Okay. Well, it'd be hard for me to address that from that perspective. I can only tell you, well, I don't have any raw numbers. I do have I can get no raw numbers, and we have done this analysis at times. I can tell you that the imposition of any delays, for example, I'll give you an example. There was a project in our area in Pennsylvania where an amendment had to be made, to a I think it was $27 million road project. Now this road project there was a change in the environmental design. There was a change in the ditch pattern that they were going to use to build it. There was a bridge and an interchange. I think it was worth $27 million.
Okay. Mr. Smeltz, if you could, just because I've only got about 24 seconds left, does anyone else on the panel have an estimate or an opinion as to whether or not they are hearing that this would have an economic impact of more than $100 million per year? Okay, if anyone can get that, perhaps a second panel, I think that'd be useful information to make sure we get to the EPA and we get to OIRA when they're trying to make a determination on this rule. And thank you for your time. Sorry.